Hello, good evening and welcome to Biz First Review 360, your weekly roundup of the top business news and developments impacting the economy. I'm Nadim Majid. This week, the rupee continued its downward spiral against the US dollar amidst what the Central Bank of Sri Lanka called unwarranted pressure on the currency. Meanwhile, also in the news this week, the prevention of terrorism funding and money laundering. Will Sri Lanka be able to get out of the hole that it is in right now? Will we be able to remove ourselves from the Financial Action Task Force's grey list as a possible hotspot for money laundering? All this and more coming up on our top stories tonight.
A cabinet paper forwarded by Minister of Finance and Mass Media Mangala Samaravira has received approval to include the Director General of the Bribery Commission, Commissioner General of the Department of Inland Revenue, the Commissioner General of the Department of Excise and representatives of the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of National Policies and Economic Affairs in the National Coordination Committee for Preventing Money Laundering and Terrorism Funding. Joint Cabinet spokesperson Minister Gayantha Karunatilaka said an expansion in the use of technology has led to an increase in financial crimes and better coordination among government institutions are essential to face the situation successfully. Sri Lanka comes under the purview of the Asia-Pacific Group of the Financial Action Task Force's Anti-Money Laundering and Countering Terrorist Finance Framework. The global anti-money laundering body placed Sri Lanka under monitoring status or a grey list last year, saying there were strategic deficiencies in combating money laundering and terrorist financing. Following the FATF action, the European Union also added Sri Lanka to its list of countries at risk for money laundering. Central Bank Governor Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy said earlier this year that an action plan is underway to get Sri Lanka out of the Financial Action Task Force grey list. Analysts say that there has not been any direct impact because of listing, but a further deterioration or lack of progress in sound anti-money laundering and terrorist financing regulations could negatively impact the country's sovereign rating, the banking system and international trade.
The notice, which appeared in mainstream daily newspapers, said that underlying fundamentals do not warrant the current pressure on the Sri Lankan rupee. Gross external reserves are presently at a healthy $9.1 billion, and the real effective exchange rate indices indicate that the currency is competitive. The central bank said the pressure on the currency is therefore unwarranted. The notice said inflows expected from the IMF, Hambantota Port and the $1 billion syndicated term loan will boost reserves to $11 billion by mid-June 2018. The central bank said it has the option of using a part of its unprecedented large external reserves to trigger a material appreciation of the rupee to prevent unwarranted depreciation of the currency.
Bilesha Veeraratne, a research fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies, says if Sri Lanka is to open its labour market to foreign workers, it is crucial to develop an authoritative framework that captures foreign credential evaluations beyond individual professional bodies.
Actually, currently Sri Lanka does not have a framework to govern migrant workers coming into Sri Lanka. So this leads to a lot of problems, especially in terms of evaluating their credentials or qualifications to work in Sri Lanka. I think that is one of the main problems or main arguments that's put forward against foreign workers coming into Sri Lanka. So first and foremost, Sri Lanka has to establish a mechanism to evaluate the credentials or the qualifications of these incoming foreign workers, so that the Sri Lankan workers who are competing with these incoming workers will be at ease knowing that they are competing with equally skilled workers or equally qualified workers.
Stay with us. On the other side of this break, we're talking to the CEO of the Shippers Academy Colombo and newly appointed Director General of the Rubber Exporters and Manufacturers Association, Rohan Masakorala, on trade. Welcome back to the show. We're joined by Mr. Rohan Masakorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy Colombo and also recently appointed Director General of the Rubber Manufacturers and Exporters Association. Mr. Masakorala, first of all, congratulations on your new appointment. I'm sure that you will do a wonderful job as the Director General of the Rubber Manufacturers and Exporters Association. The first question that I'm going to pose to you actually has to do with trade. I'm not sure how this will affect the rubber industry in particular, but given your stake in shipping and logistics as well, I'm sure this issue is of particular concern to you. The Singapore Free Trade Agreement was signed, has been on the cards for several months now. It's already been signed between the two governments and is set to come into effect. But now we're seeing a lot of pushback against it from so-called professional bodies and even the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, which has taken issue with the free trade agreement with Singapore. When this free trade agreement was initially spoken about, it was said that this was more to do with investment than with the trade of goods. Why is it that we're seeing opposition to it now?
Well, probably there are many reasons, probably. Some may be professional reasons, some may be unprofessional reasons also. Because first of all, I am a believer in free trade agreements. Sri Lanka needs to connect to the world as much as possible with many free trade agreements. The nitty-gritty of free trade agreements are not in detailed in the public generally. But as far as I know, the ministry had several rounds of discussions with various parties and they were consulted.
Just for the benefit of our public and for my benefit as well actually, what is the downside to discussing the nitty-gritty of free trade agreements in public? Is there a downside to being transparent about negotiations and what is being discussed? Don't you think that that will garner more support for those agreements if there's greater public consultation?
Yeah, it depends on the way you consult. I mean, you can't just have a public debate on this. You have to remember that there are two sides for agreement, right? So there is confidentiality from the other side, there is confidentiality from this side, and there is professional discussion from this side, there is professional discussion. So all these things, some of the technicalities and all that, general public don't understand. So when you bring in people bringing very cheap arguments and distort the whole thing, delays the whole process. At some level of management, you take decisions at the top level because you see the larger picture and the bird's eye view. So in that sense, you of course consult the chambers and relevant business associations and people who are involved in trade and services, and also people who are concerned with immigration issues, jobs and things like that.
So on that side, these are the issues where the general public can sort of understand it. For example, will this agreement lead to me losing my job? Will it reduce opportunities for employment that I have in my own country? But when it comes to responding to these concerns, legitimate concerns that are raised by the public, we see the campaign, the anti-agreement campaign, tends to be a lot stronger than the pro-agreement campaign.
That I agree. I mean, this is a problem with governance who doesn't communicate to the people, and this is very open secret. Whatever they do, the current government has been very weak in communicating to the people, and it's no different in this sense also. I mean, as party to the industry, I know a lot of discussions have had with the industry people, got input and also communicated with chambers. So in that sense, it has happened. So if there, I recently saw also Minister himself and the chief negotiator coming and explaining about the whole process, and some other areas that have been brought as concerns have been answered by him.
So let's take some of those areas that were brought up as concerns: visa access, accreditation of qualifications, identification of shortages in skilled professionals. Are these legitimate concerns? Are they credible concerns?
Yes, some of them can be credible concerns too. If a person doesn't know about the details of this, of course these are credible concerns, and the officials and the government has to be answerable for those questions if any professional organization or anybody needs to know. And I think with the Right Information Act, I think people should be able to know these details of concerns. What you mentioned, that's a legitimate concern, you have to answer. But this things like visa, I mean, Sri Lanka is one country that gets visa on arrival is Singapore. So I don't see what is the problem here. And also Singapore is a highly advanced economy which we have tied up now for a free trade agreement. I personally feel that we can use Singapore as a point of exporting to Singapore and use Singapore's other free trade agreements for our products, depending on value addition, to enter other global markets if we don't have agreements with those global markets, because Singapore has about close to 20 odd bilateral, multilateral agreements with rest of the world.
But do we have, does our industry really have the capacity to take on that challenge?
At some point we must start something, otherwise we can stay rest of our lives without free trade agreements and call ourselves a hub and a free economy and a emerging economy of the Indian Ocean. And if we don't change now, somebody has to start now. It may take time. Then global investors might look at our country as the doing business environment increases in a positive direction. So we have to decide whether we are going to as a country change or try to change, or stay, remain and be less competitive and then be poorer than rest of the region in South Asia. That's a decision we have to make.
Speaking of Sri Lanka and the world, it appears that finally maybe incidents that are beyond our control have finally brought about a long overdue change in fuel prices and the introduction apparently of a pricing formula. Now the details as at the time of recording this interview, we're not really sure of the details of the pricing formula, but the fuel price hike that has been expected for months, or for at least a year, let's say, has finally come about. What is the impact that this is going to have on the economy, on goods and services, on your industry, the rubber industry? What's the impact that you foresee?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question. I'm one who follows this fuel indexes and also currency indexes in the world market, and I was looking at this and I was wondering why is the government not explaining to the people. One time the Brent went down to $28 a barrel about 2 years back, right? And now it's hitting 70 plus in the US market and 77 plus. So it's twice or thrice the price 2 years back in the world market. And government was holding on to the local reduction which was 162 or so in the 2014, and when the new government came in, they suddenly brought it down to 170 in the petrol prices. I'm just talking. So I think that was a wrong decision to bring it down so much, because people don't appreciate things like that, because they always see the upward trend. Even today, the new price of 140 or 138 something is not the level that we were paying in 2015. People would have forgotten that, but the reality is that we are living in a world market. So we have to buy commodities at world market price and adjust the local system. Of course, it's not only for us. All competing countries who buy oil will have to pay that amount. So we in one scale in the world platform, everybody will be having the same problem. In the domestic market, yes, it will impact cost to the country, as we are a net fuel importer, and a biggest of our import bill is fuel.
On that note, we'll go in for a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about global pressures, especially the fallout of the Iran nuclear deal. How will it impact Sri Lanka and, as Mr. Masakora says, our oil imports? Welcome back to the program. We're in conversation with Rohan Masakorala, CEO of the Shippers Academy Colombo, and also recently appointed Director General of the Rubber Manufacturers and Exporters Association. Mr. Masakorala, when we left off, we were talking, you mentioned the fact that on our imports bill, oil takes up the biggest proportion. The US President Donald Trump has announced that they are pulling out of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the Iran nuclear deal, a deal which was intended to prevent Iran from securing a nuclear weapon for several years. This means that sanctions, US sanctions on Iran, will be reimposed. How will this affect Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka's oil imports?
Well, the expectation is that Iranian oil will stop coming into the market again, and as a result the supply will reduce and prices are reacting to that. But it's just to see what exactly is going to happen, but I can see already major companies will have problems of dealing with Iran because once the US doesn't recognize those companies and they do business with Iran, it's a gamble that those companies will have to do away with Iran. So basically Iran will be having problems again dealing with the world markets, and also Sri Lanka is sensitively connected with the tea industry to Iran. So obviously anyway world oil prices were poised to go up even without the Iranian crisis, because economic growth overall in the United States, Europe was recovering. 2018 we are expecting a 4% GDP growth around the world, some of the forecasts. So obviously economic activity increasing, and some of the countries trying to restrict production. There was a thought 6-8 months that oil will be around $75 to $80 by the end of this year. This new development might trigger a further escalation of oil prices. That is going to hit us as a very badly.
Sometime back, when when the sanctions regime on Iran went into sort of high gear, we heard mention among the petroleum industry that our refinery in Sapukaskanda it's ideal if you have Iranian light crude in there, and that one of the reasons that the refinery was constantly breaking down is that they were using the wrong type of crude oil. I'm not sure what the status of the refinery is right now, because we are also importing a large percentage of refined fuel.
Yes.
But you also mentioned the tea industry, and Iran is a major market for Ceylon tea. In the midst of all of this is definitely going to have an impact on our trade deficit. Do you think that Sri Lanka's foreign policy has been weak in this? Do you think that, I know it's almost an inconceivable sort of notion, but given that all of the other parties to the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, were supportive of continuing it, and the only party that didn't want to continue with it was the US. We've seen the French President Emmanuel Macron being very supportive of it, the Chinese, the Russians, the Germans, the European Union as a whole supported the continuation of it. It was only the United States and President Donald Trump that decided particularly that this was no longer going to be the case. Do you think that Sri Lanka should have, somewhere, given our trade interests with Iran, and given that there is in terms of trade, a beneficial relationship at least for us there, do you think that we should have taken a stand?
We could
have. Or would you have liked to have seen us take?
Well, we could, but our muscle power is very low in circumstances of this global giants clashing, and of course it's not only United States. Israel plays a very important role in this whole decision. So there is geopolitics happening there, and I think Sri Lanka's role in that geopolitical game is probably irrelevant, although we can have opinion. But we are totally dependent on these global pressures, and I don't think we can do much, but it's going to help. Do
you think the consequences for Sri Lanka would be worse if we were to say we're not going to abide by your sanctions regime, that we will continue to do business with Iran?
Well, yes, definitely, because our exports go to United States in a big way. It would not help us in that way. There will be consequences, definitely. It's a difficult area for the government to come and say that, and it would be tough on our industries. Talking of refineries and all, I just want to add, Sri Lanka lost its opportunities in the 60s when we nationalized oil. All the refineries of foreign companies went to Singapore, and that's why Singapore became the #1 hub in the world for crude refinery and refinery center, and today it's the LNG refinery center also. They want to be the #1 in the world. So we nationalized this in the 1960s. All the companies were thrown out of Sri Lanka. They went and set up under Lee Kuan Yew in the 60s in Singapore, and that's how that country actually became a maritime hub. Before it became a maritime hub, they had the energy policy. We have messed up our energy policy. Sri Lanka needs investment in refineries, probably in Hambantota, Trincomalee. Sapukaskanda is not the answer. Sapukaskanda is not definitely the answer for Sri Lanka's oil problems.
On that note, I'd also like to. I tend to agree with you, given that you know the majority of the oil that we are importing right now is already refined, and there is very little refining that's happening in Sri Lanka right now. But before we wrap up, though, I also want to talk about, in this sort of volatile climate where you've got the Iran nuclear deal that's ending, fresh sanctions that's going to have a negative impact on our exports, the rupee is devaluing. We've been assured by those in government and the authorities concerned that it's not necessarily a bad thing, but still it feels like a bad thing. What about for you?
Yeah, I mean, for the exporters it's a good news. When the rupee devalues, it's a good news. For importers it's not good news, and being a net import dependent country, there can be issues. I think one of the reasons the depreciation is also because these 2 years or 3 years we have to pay heavy debt, so we need to buy more demand for dollars, so obviously the pressure on the dollar goes up on one side. So it's a thing that we have to live with, but hopefully if we can macro manage the situation and get investments towards export driven economy and a service driven economy, what we need is the dollars through investments rather than dollars through borrowing. If we can go towards that kind of a business environment this country can create, then of course in the medium term it's a okay situation, because we have to pay these massive loans, whether it's this government or next government. They will be all under pressure to pay the dollar loans that we have taken, and interest we have to pay on those things. These are realistic economic things. I can criticize in a popularistic manner, no, it's not good, or it's bad. It's a problem we all citizens have to understand in a greater manner. Nobody wants it to depreciate if you are an importer, or a government doesn't want to see that happening if you are a net importer. So these problems have cropped up not because of today's actions or yesterday's actions. Over a period, relatively a medium to long term period, we have taken wrong decisions in terms of managing our macro level investments and the overall country position. So as a result, these are failures being reflected in the market. So you can't blame present or immediate present, but over a long period it's bad management.
In the short term, what are the measures that can be taken right now, today, tomorrow, next week, next month? What are the measures that we can take, that we can institute right now to set this on a corrective path?
Well, couple of things. I mean, the last year's budget that announced a lot of reforms, policy consistency has to be done. If you are taking unpopular measures as a government coming into an election in 1.5 years, then you have to explain to the people properly that these policy measures are taken for these reasons. Why the rupee's depreciation suddenly? I think it's good that if rather than saying it's good, why it is happening has to be explained to the ordinary people in simple language. I can understand, as an economist and a person in the business industry, I can understand the macro problems a government or a central bank faces. But the ordinary man just doesn't see that. The ordinary man doesn't understand the petrol prices going up to 138 from 117. He has forgotten that he paid 160 3 years back. He has forgotten that, but he sees the current issue. So if these things are not explained by officials and politicians who are running the country now, it will bounce back on them as far as politicians are concerned. But the next government won't have a quick fix solution for these things, because Sri Lanka is grappled with these problems which we have built for 20 years or so in a very unprofessional manner. Why I am saying 20 years is, look at the export sector. What happened to our export sector as a GDP? Just lip service, no government actually really focused on the sector. So as a result, foreign exchange loss.
So in very simple terms, polluta payatiyala policy hadan.
Exactly. Exactly.
Make policy with your feet on the ground.
Exactly.
Mr. Masakora, thank you very much. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on BizFirst Review 360. And that's our show for this week. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week. Don't forget to look us up on Facebook. You'll find us at BizFirst Review 360. I'm Nadim Majid. Good night and good luck.